those happy, chubby types, you know, about sort of knocking on 10 stone. You know, a bit of a fat, sweaty blonde.
And I was like kind of this big.
Wimp, it's much safer you survive that way.
I wasn't actually even a fat child, you know, I was quite thin then, and so I didn't particularly stand out.
To find that I was in fights because people thought that I was an Indian, I mean, I'm not even Asian.
I used to run around the street shouting, nigger, nigger, pull the trigger, bang, bang, bang.
This is like a hide of a rhino.
Don't be such a sissy, you know, that's for girls.
You know, having your head put down the loo with talcum powder and all that and flushing it.
The boy who was nice to girls, I would regularly duff him up.
I was not tolerated. I was bullied incessantly.
Well, when the kid told me I was a bully, that was a bit of an eye-opener.
You may be black, or you may have ginger hair, you might wear glasses, you might have a big nose, do you know what I mean? When you actually kind of narrow it down, there's probably only one kid in the class that's not got any of those things. So there's actually a very wide choice for bullies, really. They can almost invent anything.
From the very first day that I went to nursery school, I was aware that there were boys who were bigger than me who could push me over and make me cry.
I'd sooner be hostile to my own servant.
But I just had to work out strategies to avoid being pushed over.
Though I was constantly afraid of bigger boys.
My experience throughout life is that stuff is bigger than you and stronger than you and more powerful than you.
I learned at an early age, maybe that was the Jewish in me, because it was very useful to keep a low profile as a Jew in Eastern Europe, Western Europe, anywhere other. And some of that must be in my genes, to kind of not cause a stir, not cause waves.
Kurt's marvellous. We're absolutely delighted with him. Really, Andre, he's wonderful.
This Basil's wife. This Basil. This smack on head.
I was like smaller than everybody else. I was weedier than everybody else. I had sight that was shorter than anyone else's. And not only was I specky four eyes, I had those teeth that stick out as well.
In secondary school, there was a boy who was much bigger, who was a bully. Bit of a weedy type, actually, with glasses, and you'd think he'd be the one to be bullied, except he was tall. And he was going at me for a while, and things like calling me dirty German Jewish pig and nice things like that.
I can remember my first day at secondary school. I asked a bigger boy where the toilets were, and he said, your head will be down there by the end of the week. And I went into the toilets, and they were disgusting. You know that scene in Train Spotting when the guy goes down the toilet? Well, that toilet in Train Spotting was like Ulrika Johnson's boudoir compared with ours at Wanstead High School. And I realised that head and toilet were going to meet before the end of the week. And so clearly what I had to do was to devise a strategy to make sure it wasn't too distressing.
And I still remember we're in the quadrangle of the school. He started at me and sort of hovered over me, tall, and I just lost my rag. I was frightened, of course, in panic again. But before I could think about it, I hit him. And nobody had ever hit this guy. I could hardly reach him. I hit him in the face. And he staggered back because he'd never experienced that. And never touched me again after that. And I felt a great kind of triumph, you know.
So I got matey with some of the bigger boys. I just kind of walked up to them and started sort of joking with them. So I was like, they took the mickey out of me a lot, but I was like kind of a little bit friendly with them. They knew who I was. And then next morning when we went into school, I waited till they went into the lavatory, and I went in there too, knowing that they would push my head down the toilet, but also knowing that because I'd like developed a relationship with them, it actually wouldn't be too bad. It would all be a bit jokey. And they pushed my head down the lap, but it only like it went about that far, and they had been cleaned by the cleaners because it was early in the morning. But I was the kid who first had his head down the toilet, so I achieved a lot of kudos. And it's disgusting, and it's slimy, and it's really the kind of strategy that I've tended to adopt throughout my life, and I'm sure that people disapprove of it thoroughly, but then when you're a little kid, you don't actually have all that many options.
Manuel never thinks of himself as bullied, because I imagine he came from a large family where the only way to be noticed is to get a clip around the ear from his mother or father, it was a confirmation that he was loved, that he was part of the family.
Oh, you are so cute.
You're a waste of space.
Oh!
I don't think he feels victimized by that at all. He might feel a bit of pain.
Where is Dor? Dor is gone. Dor was here.
Where, Oh dear, good morning, Major. I'm so sorry. I'm afraid the dining room door seems to have disappeared.
Get the timing right, you don't get hurt. Get the timing wrong, you do.
I went to a school called West Derby Comprehensive in Liverpool, which was which had about 1,000 white boys and me. I used to run around the street shouting, "Nigger, nigger, pull the trigger, bang, bang, bang," until my mum gave me a clump, because all the kids were shouting it to me, so I thought you just shouted it to people. You know, I didn't realise what it meant.
I was the new kid, and I looked different, and I came from a different background, and as soon as people realised I came from India, and again it shows the obvious immaturity of the other young kids who kept saying, well, when are you going to go back to your wigwam?
Bullying. Well, if I remember rightly, it started about when I was 12 years old. And at that age, you'd just started your secondary school. So when this person started picking on me, it became a little bit hurtful.
A gang of lads used to constantly wait outside the gates for me, and I used to have to go out the back way and jump over the wall and get on the bus to stop before so that they couldn't beat me up at the bus stop.
To be called an indie bum, you know, and all that was all a bit disconcerting at first, and then rather painful. And then to find that I was in fights because people thought that I was an Indian.
And then the nigger started, you know, sort of like, I'm talking to you, blackie, type of thing. And they'd call you things like coon and sort of like wog.
There was all these words that were getting thrown at the black guy, and the black guy only had a honky to come back with, you know. And honky's a lousy put down, isn't it, really, you know?
So it was kind of a shock to find myself, whereas I'd been a happily accepted schoolboy in India, to come home to England and find that suddenly I was thrown into this role of being bullied and having to fight back.
It was a very sort of very strong climate in the 70s of sort of racism, and I kind of knocked around with the hippies, the people who were into Led Zeppelin and you know, Iron Maiden and things like that, which is not really my style. You know, I should have been with the Soul Boys, but there was no Soul Boys in my school, so the most acceptable alternative were the ones that didn't have swastikas on them.
Well, it's the fat kid thing, isn't it? Those who are different. Black kids, fat kids, ginger kids. You're a physical. It's a very easy thing to pick out and you're fat, you're fat, you're fat. You're always the last one picked in football, you're fat, you're fat.
Bill Jupiter's on GLR. Let's face it, the man is girl bait.
If you think about it, in the world's media today, who do they pick on? Paul Gascoigne, Danny Baker, Chris Evans, two fat lads and a ginge. That's all I'm saying.
This was the perfecto mix of Mr. Wendell by Arrested Development, available on the Speeches thing.
I'm always getting dissed in reviews, and I think it's people hate the look of fat kids. And they just remember that from school. It's a throwback thing.
Oh, I was a big girl. Well, I was clumsy big, you know, I sort of like, I was one of those happy, chubby types, you know, about sort of knocking on 10 stone. You know, a bit of a fat, sweaty blonde.
It's a terrible thing to say, but I think that kids are kind of like natural biological fascists. It's picking the weak.
And this dance movement teacher said to me, "You're too fat. You're too fat. And, you know, the only thing you'll ever get is character parts, because you're just going to be a fat actress." So, oh, sod you. And I basically starved myself down to 5 stone 13.
There was this one kid. I just remember asking him to pass. Could you pass the potatoes, please? And there was a kid who used to sit at the head of the table. The kids who sort of used to give out the food. He handed me the potatoes and he looked me in the face. He goes, "Yeah, you would be wanting more, wouldn't you? Because you're a fat shit, just like your useless cousin." And like, man, I was crying for 2 days after that. Just, it's the verbal stuff always got me more. I was very, physically, I got in one fight, and that was because I said something daft about a guy, and so frankly, you know, I had it coming for being a dick. But the verbal stuff gets you more.
I was no threat at all because I was a bit too red and sweaty to get boyfriends. And then suddenly I changed and became rather gorgeous when I was about 15 and got loads of boyfriends. I didn't change at all, I just became rather easy actually.
My first English school was great, there was no problems at all. When I got to Eton, I was therefore fully buoyant. I wasn't expecting any form of nastiness, and it started purely because I looked pretty. Boys would say, "You're a tart." I said, "Well, what is a tart?" And they then weren't quite sure themselves, but they discovered that it meant that you were consorting with other bigger boys and that you took money for your favours. Well, I didn't know what the favours were that they were talking about. You were constantly worried about, if you're walking down the street, someone wolf whistling from one of the windows, etc. And when you're in chapel, which you had to do once every day and twice on Sundays, the churches don't have benches facing the altar. They all face inwards, facing each other, so that was misery. I can't describe it other than to say that it's the only time in my whole life that I have been made utterly humiliated and miserable. One of the rules was that if you weren't 5'1" in height, then you wore what was called bum freezers. That was a coat which was cut off at the waist, and then you could move to tails like penguins. I told my mother that I thought one of the worst things about it was wearing these bum freezer jackets, because you're wandering around with your backside sort of not covered. I can't explain it. It's just that it was a really unpleasant atmosphere. I do remember looking at the pavement. I got pretty good at walking in a straight line, not bumping into lampposts, just looking at the floor. And if you didn't see people, you couldn't see their sort of sneer.
A lot of the kids at this school had very thick Newcastle accents, and they were often skinheads, and they were tough working class kids, and I'd never come across people like that before, particularly from the north, particularly from Newcastle. I didn't understand anything they'd say, so they'd possibly say something to me that was quite friendly. I don't know. I didn't understand them. It was a foreign language to me, and I'd say, "I'm sorry," and it would immediately turn into, you know, "I'm terribly sorry, I don't know what you mean." You know, that was the end of it.
I think that's straight now. 2 hours it's taken me to panel beat my head back into shape.
I looked like a pansy. That was what I mean. You know, you look like a pansy, you're a puff, you're a ponce. Those are all the terms of abuse that were constantly thrown at me. Particularly ponce, I never understood, because I thought a ponce was somebody who lived off prostitutes and, you know, didn't... Yeah, and I knew that then. I'd looked it up in the dictionary, but that proved I was a swat. A posh swat, but knew what ponce meant. So I needed my head kicked in.
I'm sorry, sir.
Sorry? Why are you sorry?
Well, the Space Corps Directive 195 clearly states that in an emergency power situation, a hologrammatic crew member must lay down his life in order that the living crew members might survive.
Yes, but RIMA Directive 271 states just as clearly, no chance you metal bastard.
At that age, you're still quite tender, so you know, I wanted my mum, you know, although I was an adolescent, still basically a kid wanting to be, you know, why do I have to go through all this?
You've changed, you know that?
Changed?
They may not see it, but I did.
By the time I went to the third school out of the 3 schools I went to, I was the hard kid, because I really, and they went again to a rural grammar school, where most of the kids were farmers' children and nicely, you know, nice, polite children, and suddenly this roughhouse lout with long hair who smoked and swore and spat walked in, and I'd actually had training in being the new boy. So I just went in hard, right early on.
Oh. You okay, man? I'm fine, thank you, Susan.
I don't know whether kids are born with it or whether they're taught it. I really can't say. But if you're one of those kids that doesn't want to play football, doesn't want to particularly climb trees, likes the company of girls and collecting broken jewellery, which I did, then you're bound to stand out.
The school heroes, you know, were little boys who played rugby and football and cricket and so on. And I was a very skinny child. Although I was moderately tall for my age, I was very underweight. And rapidly got more so, of course, because I became more and more and more miserable. I had no point of relationship with the other little boys at the school.
My first real experience of almost like slight hatred towards me was when the kids at school found out that I wanted to go to dancing classes and was going to dancing classes. They started calling me Sissy. This was when I was 7 and 8. And their only attitude towards dance was sort of seeing it sent up by, say, Benny Hill on the television in a pair of tights with floppy wrists, you know.
I can remember being called Puff and Girly from about the age of 5. I mean, I heard those words long before I knew what they meant. You know, kids would say they're going to get me after school, and I used to just jump over the fences. There used to be all these houses that backed onto the school, and I would just literally jump over someone's garden and run through their garden.
Well, my mother died when I was 6, and that became my kind of weak spot. But I kind of sat about thinking, I feel entirely different from everybody else. And I don't know what everybody else's family situation was like, but all of my friends had mums and dads.
There was a kid at our school who said he could actually pull his face off. And we should have said, don't be so stupid, you'll hurt yourself. But we were 9, so we said, face off, face off, face off, face off!
I had a good childhood, but I was bullied because of my deafness mainly.
Carrie, this is David, my brother.
Hi.
People say, oh, you're the man from Mars. And it's because I used to wear straps and it looks a bit like a bra, but there's 2 hearing aids inside it with leads coming up here. There's a phonic here.
He says that's a beautiful place. Hilly.
It was very much Baldylocks, Bald Hugh, you know, Duncan the Dunce, that type of thing. At 7, it was obvious I was dyslexic, and then I lost my hair at the age of 10 after an accident. Well, I fell 18 feet out of a tree, which wasn't much fun, and landed on my lip just here. It became very swollen. And some months later, I got bald patches, and the specialists feel that I'd damaged a nerve in the lip that had another effect on another nerve, the hair nerves, the ends of the hair nerves. And after about 8 months, all my hair started to fall out. And, you know, you can imagine I was at a boarding school, and suddenly this little lad was looking really very different.
Oh, I used to get my head ducked into basins of water. I would be beaten continuously with slippers and even sticks. I'd be held down and beaten.
The atmosphere generally was relentless mickey-taking. I mean, it's just non-stop. You're always scared to move sometimes. Someone would say something deeply sarcastic at your expense.
And it was like, hey, bully! Like this, Kojak and things like that later on. And it really, each time, it was like, ooh, it was like hitting a raw nerve. And eventually, I got to the point where I wore a wig, just to kind of hide from it.
I did have the advantage of having 4 brothers who would come to my rescue, you know, when the chips were down. So if anybody hit me, you know, that would be it. I would go and get Richard, my big brother, and he would come and pulverize them. I remember one boy kicked me in the stomach, and everyone was going, you're going to get it, you know, with all the other kids going, you've had it now, you know, George as well is going to get you. And he really kind of almost begged me not to. to get my brother to hit him, which I did. I didn't get my brother to hit him in the end, but I wanted to.
In junior school, there was a hut, a mobile hut, which was called the partially hearing unit, and there was about 11 of us, and we were like a team. And sometimes I felt that we had a lot of presence in the school. That's the mobile hut where all the deaf children are. So it was inevitable that would draw attention. So I came to accept bullying as part of normal life.
I remember the growing realization that you were being allowed to be singled out again. I remember trying to find ways to avoid the lead bullies. And eventually I found one or two hiding places, I suppose you would call them, where I'd be safe, the lavatory being probably the primary example. But you can't spend the whole of your childhood in the loo, can you?
When you're a little kid, if other boys or call you girly, it's normally to do with the fact that you've missed the goal, or you cry when you fall over. I mean, adults do it too. You hear grown men sort of saying to little boys, "Don't be such a sissy. That's for girls." Psychologically, somewhere deep inside, you really have this feeling that maybe those things are true. And I think for a gay child, it's much more extreme because it's everywhere. It's in the Bible. You go to Sunday school and, you hear those things, that man should not lie with man. And even though it's not really discussed, you hear, you discover your sexuality through cruel jokes in the playground. That's how you find out what you are.
I think perhaps that bullies like to have some effect on the world if they feel powerless themselves. They can influence some poor kid's behaviour every day. It gives them a sense of power.
I was a bit of a bully, really. When you're a boy, it's quite important who is the best fighter in the class, and you establish fairly early on through a series of schoolboy scuffles who's good at fighting.
I think I was held in some esteem, a little feared. I mean, it's horrible, really, isn't it? A little feared. I mean, I think I was the, maybe about the 5th best fighter in the school, which is, I mean, maybe this is why I was given in the secondary school very thin arms. This was sort of evolution sorting itself out.
It's a poem about bullying. I bullied a boy when I was at school. I pushed him in the back, I pushed him in the front, I pushed him up his stool, I pushed him in the pool. I was cruel, uncool, no.
I think the way it was, you bully one person one week and then you might move on to someone else the next week once you're tired of humiliating them. And of course there were bullies above me who were harder than me. And occasionally you have to, like a couple of, gorillas or something, you have to lock horns. Not that gorillas have horns, I grant you.
I don't know why. You see, I can't answer you why was I like that. The devil in you is the old phrase, isn't it? He's got the devil in him. And rather than sort of great big things about, oh, it's not right at home, there is an element of devilment in kids, isn't there?
There was the tough boy, George Gash, famous. He was a bit of a bully monkey, actually, really. He was never that good at fighting, but quite good, better than me. And he famously could piss very high on the toilet wall. And he would come in, I was in the A class, it was streaming, and he was in the B class or C class, and he would come in and beat up a different boy in the A class every lunchtime. And you wondered if it was going to be your turn on any given lunchtime.
And there was another time in the Cubs, when I was in the Wolf Cubs, there was these kids, and one of them was going to leave, and the Cub master said, "You're going to leave because of people like." So it wasn't so bad because I was put in a bracketing system. People like Hegley pushing you around, and he said yes, and that was. But I kept on doing it. But dear, it sounds fucking horrendous.
For example, I used to bully girls willy-nilly. I mean, it's embarrassing to admit to it now, obviously, a new man like myself. But I was a terrible bullier of girls, and I in fact set up the anti-girls club. And yeah, I had like made little badges. I was talking about this morning. I can't remember if I did this with if this was meant to be funny or if I meant it, but whatever. It was anti-girls club. I was like the chairman of the chair boy, and I would give out like little medals that I'd made for anyone who'd done something horrible to a girl. Like one boy broke a girl's umbrella, and I gave him a bronze medal.
There was a girl who I loved. I think she was. I was only about 9, and I think love is the word. And I was unable to tell her, and I used to tease her and flick her and kick her, and I mean, never told her how I felt. And this was every day, and every day I used to, every day having to go in and having to do it almost, having to sort of do all this stuff to her because I wanted a relationship with her. And this was the only way I had the relationship, was to sort of bully her.
When I saw Jane and Wojtek kiss, I was jealous of their bliss, and I reported them to Miss.
Jane Sanderson was the girl I bullied at school, and yeah, I mean, I've not thought about the psychology of this. Awful to say it, but you still spot the weakness that you would go for then, but now, I mean, obviously I control myself, but it's sort of funny to know that that thing is still there, that impulse to such unpleasantness.
Another club I set up was the Anti-Rimmer Club. Not that Rimmer, Gary Rimmer, was particularly weaker than me, well, he probably was. But I just picked on him, and I formed the Anti-Rimmer Club. Again, I was following in my motif of clubs that I set up using my henchmen to kind of bully him. We used to run away from him. He'd want to walk home with us after school, and we'd let him catch up. Then we'd all run away and leave him. Oh, it's terrible, really, isn't it, when you think about it? Although now, Gary Rimmer is a close friend. I was best man at his wedding, And I knew him when I was 10. I bullied the hell out of him.
In fact, bullies are singularly unsensitive people who think they're having a bit of fun, and usually showing off in front of their peers. But I must say, the odd occasions when I've actually managed to take bullies out and cut them down to size has given me a bully-like pleasure.
Yeah, I have got a bullying tendency, and that comes from my father. My father was a bully. He ruled with a roar and fist, and you can't help but be affected by that. That's part of me. That's part of my education. So if I sat here and said, oh no, I'm he'll buy the world of Coke, that's not true. I've got a nasty streak, absolutely. I'm quite conscious of that.
As a child, I never really got bullied by other children, but when I was a bit older at school, probably 14, 15, I had a very difficult time with one particular teacher. I mean, I wasn't actually even a fat child, I was quite thin then, so I didn't particularly stand out.
I remember I had a metalwork teacher who, this lazy scumbag, how he could have the audacity to do this, wrote in a school report, Philip seems to find snail's pace exhausting. Oh, big laugh, very funny.
We changed English teachers just before our O-levels, and this new teacher came in and took over, and for some reason she just didn't like me, and sort of took it upon herself to kind of humiliate me at every possible moment.
There was one teacher, and he was in the Society of the Sealed Knot, and he taught history. And he used to drive around in a World War II sort of Land Rover kind of thing. And he used to ritually abuse me every history class.
Told me I had a speech impediment, which was very odd, because I'd never heard that before, and said that I would definitely not pass my spoken English because I sounded so stupid.
He'd get me out and he'd put pencils in between my fingers and then crush the pencils, and it doesn't half hurt. And then he'd take a ruler and he'd do rulers on your knuckles and stuff like that.
I told me mum. Yeah, I told my mum about it.
And then one time he made me take a comb, he smashed me on the knuckles with the comb, and then made me swing my arm around like that until all the blood was flying all over the class.
Well, what she did first of all was, because I'd been marked down on so many things and got really bad marks, she said to me, I'll do your English homework tonight. She was like, right, you know. She said, I'll do it and we'll see just how well I do, you know. And so she did a piece of homework for me. I gave it in and it got like a really bad mark, which either means that my mum was crap at English or that this woman, you know, even though it was a sort of decent piece of work, was just marking it down again.
The older I got, the more I sort of learned to handle it, and I tried to be funny, make people like me, you know, because if they liked me, you know, if I made them laugh, one, they wouldn't hit me, and two, they'd be, you know, less likely to, you know, to racially abuse me and insult me in front of people. So I just became a bit of a class clown, really.
The great thing about Baldrick, I think, in terms of my experience of being bullied, is that he demonstrates a tactic that I sometimes used to employ, which is complete and utter stupidity.
Why have you got a piece of cheese tied to the end of your nose?
To catch mice, my lord. I lie on the floor with my mouth open and hope they scurry in.
And do they?
Not yet, my lord.
I must have dealt with it fairly well, and I've got a feeling my father played a big role in that, because he was very strong behind me. I don't remember that, as far as I know, he never went to the school and complained about the bullying. Maybe he should have done, I don't know. But between he and I, we talked it through a lot, and I remember him saying to me, look, you just, you know, don't go mad, but fight back. If a guy hits you, punch him back. Tell him, just let him know that he just can't do that sort of thing.
The anxiety of that is, you just can't describe it. The traumatic experience. To go into school thinking, right, today I'm going to fight back. Yeah, great.
I'd love to know how to bring a kid up to be scared but not a coward. I think it's a very important thing to learn, and I don't know how you do it, because being scared is really useful.
I, for one, in those days, I have to admit that I believed in a punch for a punch.
And I turned out to be a real little scrapper.
Why did I pay for you to have judo lessons? Try a Sotogari! Nice to be on the same side again, Pop. Looks like it's the winning side, too.
The best way I found was later on was to ignore what they were saying and just keep walking. And that is the strongest thing to do. It's just to stay centered and not be nonplussed about the situation.
I actually turned to shoplifting, that was my thing. That's what finally commanded the respect of my peers, when I could get them free stuff. I used to get shopping lists, get presents for people's parents and stuff, you know. What's that really famous fell walking book? Remember that bloke who did that? Yeah, I nicked one of his. Sorry, mate.
I was a bit scared that my mum would kind of ride up to the school on a horse and start shooting everyone, because she is sort of that kind of mum. I mean, she's great, you know, for those sorts of things, but at that age, you know, you don't, you know, you're embarrassed enough as it is when your parents turn up to sports day, kind of whatever they're wearing.
If my mum had come to the school to sort out my argument with this boy, you know, that there's a million terms of abuse ready and waiting on the shelves of of male torment.
And my mother was going to go up to school and I went, don't you dare go up to the school and complain. Please don't. That would have been worse for me.
I was always scared of my dad going up to the school and battering everybody. Do you know? My dad heard about it. So, no, I never really whinged much about it, you know.
If I saw one of them in the street, and what with me now having gone from this wimpish little Keith Chegwin looky-likey in his blazer and with his coy, look and his bad haircut, grown into 6 foot and 20 stone of pissed off bloke, I would walk up to him in the street and I would initially be going, did you? Is your name? And I'd twat them. I would leather them. Because it's almost like I can now get the revenge for the little kid. It's almost like I'm doing it externally for someone different.
I do run on there's a lot of revenge that I think you run on. And I think if you have been bullied, then there's can gear you on a bit, so right, I'll show you.
Someone actually tried to hire me for a job recently, who I was at school with. And I turned down the job on the grounds, out of left field, completely from nowhere, because I changed my name, that I wouldn't work with him because, he's probably used to people saying, well, I can't work with you because I have commitments with BBC and so forth. I'm afraid I can't do that now because we're actually involved in a writing project. And I said, I'm afraid I can't do your programme because you once set this idiot big mate of yours on me. Next time you want to use a bully to do your dirty work, you better think about the future consequences. 20 years after the event, man, I got a good feeling out of that.
In the short term, it was horrible. In the long run, it was probably a benefit because it smashed my rose-coloured spectacles. The experience of being verbally bullied by a group of people has led me for the rest of my life into being more comfortable doing things rather than sitting down with a group of people speaking about things.
I spent a many years trying to recover my self-belief and my self-esteem. I found it necessary to consistently volunteer for things which I thought would prove my validity as a person. I think I don't have a great talent for friendship. Well, I think I am a bit of an emotional cripple in a way.
It's interesting, I've recently been on a theatre tour, and even though, I'm on the telly an awful lot all the time, there was another guy who was a senior figure in the profession who took against me completely. I still have no idea why. And he tried to bully me. And there was me at 50 being on the receiving end of a guy who was trying to bully me in the way that you used to in the playground. And I actually stuck it for a few weeks because I started to feel like you do when you're a kid and are being bullied. So I was very mature and decked him.
In a way, all the guys that used to bully me and pick on me and abuse me are kind of not doing as well as I am. So fuck them. Sorry.
I feel good. I knew that I wouldn't. I feel good. I knew that I wouldn't. So good, so good. I got you.
A Bullying Survival Guide brochure is available. For a copy, please send a cheque for £2.50, made payable to BBC Education, to Bullying, P.O. Box 7, London W12, 8UD.
They searched out their targets with devastating accuracy, then destroyed them.
There was nothing I could do about it, and no one you could tell.
By stripping away their dignity, beating and abusing them.
I just couldn't take no more.
And there wasn't even a war on. Victims of bullying in the army talk frankly about their experiences in Something About a Uniform. Part of the Bully Season, Sunday at 9:20 on BBC Two.
Now BBC Two, a survival guide from those who've been there. The Bully Season